Welcome to Browns Insider here on cleveland.com. I'm your host, Chris Fedor, joining me in studio again for the second week in a row here on cleveland.com. Our Browns beat reporting team, Tom Reed and Mary-Kay-Cabot. Thanks so much for joining me again this week.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
All right, so the Browns coming off a loss. They're 1-2. They're going into the bye week. They can't lose this weekend, so that's good. 1-2, 2 almost wins. A combined 7 points has been the deciding factor in all 3 games. So when you look at the first 3, you got the close loss against the Steelers, you've got the win against New Orleans, close loss against Baltimore. How would you assess where this team is after 3 games, Mary-Kay?
Well, you know what? I mean, I think they're ahead of where we all thought that they were going to be offensively. I think they're behind defensively, which has been very, very surprising. And record-wise, they're about where we thought they would be right now. We thought, you know what, hey, if they win 1 game out of these first 3, then I think everyone thought that would probably be a halfway decent thing.
I would agree on the record, and I would agree on the analysis on the offense and defense. Coming out of that preseason, you were just wondering how they were going to move the ball, how they were going to get points. You thought the running game might be okay, but since they were broadcasting it to the world that they were going to run the ball, you'd think, well, after maybe a quarter and a half, teams would just load the box and they wouldn't be able to run anymore. But what happened? Brian Hoyer has been very, for the most part, pretty effective, and he's done enough to keep defenses honest. Not only has he done enough, he's hit some long passes, and those receivers that we were all worried about in preseason, lo and behold, they're running wide open in some cases. So, but the defense has been a struggle.
Week 4 in the NFL, the Browns on a bye week. When they come back, they get the Tennessee Titans. But as we recap the first 3, all right, so we look at a win against the Steelers, or the almost win against the Steelers, the win against the Saints, and the loss against Baltimore. In these first 3 games, do you feel like they've improved from week 1 to where they are right now, going into the bye week and then coming off that bye week against Tennessee?
You know what? I think they have improved in certain areas, but then we've seen other areas where, you know what, they really need to get things figured out during the bye week. And of course, that is special teams. There's a lot going on there with the long snapping, the kicking teams, the coverage. I mean, it's just all been a jumbled mix of not what anybody expected. Run defense, they've got to get that shored up. They absolutely have to get that taken care of. They're averaging 153.7 yards given up per game. I mean, that's just astounding. A rookie, Taliaferro, came in this last game and ran all over them. The holes are enormous. I watched that game again on tape the other day, and it was just amazing to me that the holes were there. And I think, again, I talked to Jim Leonard about this too, the safety who's been with Mike Pettin for 6 years now, and he said, it takes a while for the scheme to come together. There's Carlos Dansby's making the calls. I mean, it takes a while to know where the run fits are and those kind of things, and you can see that there's some growing pains.
So are you starting to think that it's no longer a lack of talent, it's more that they have to just get used to what's going on here now?
That's really what I think. I mean, they've got playmakers on this defense, all over this defense. There are big playmakers, and they just need to learn to work together better.
I think if you look in the last 2 seasons, the run defense it was one of the things that improved about this team. For years, for years they could not stop the run, and the last 2 years they had been better against the run. So you have to think, and if you agree that Carlos Dansby is an upgrade on DeQuell Jackson as far as a playmaker, then it would make sense that they, unless the entire team's in a slump from the run defense, that it is maybe just adjusting to the scheme and stuff like that.
If you have any questions, any comments, go to the comments section at the bottom of the post. It's Browns Insider here on cleveland.com. Taking a look back at the first 3 games for the Browns. They're 1-2 heading into the bye week. When they come off the bye, they're going to take on the Tennessee Titans. Speaking of the run defense, and you mentioned the improvements that they made defensively, I think that's what's been so maddening about the first 3 games for Browns fans. Because there's a segment of Browns fans that are excited because they're playing better, and they're in these games, and they're close games, but you look at all the improvements that they made defensively, giving big money to Carlos Dansby and Dante Whitner, using top 10 picks on Barkevious Mingo and Joe Hayden and Justin Gilbert, and it's just not coming together. You mentioned it, Mary-Kay. Mark Ingram is running all over him. Kyrie Robinson running all over him. Lorenzo Taliaferro, whose people, they had no idea how to pronounce this guy's name before the game even started. These are not the big name guys running all over this defense.
Well, here's a few things that are going on right now. First of all, Barkevious Mingo has not really adjusted to the new scheme yet. They think that they can get a lot out of Barkevius, and maybe that will happen as the year goes along, but they need to continue to coach him up and find the best way to get him off that edge into the quarterback, and he needs to finish the play. Justin Gilbert, he's having the rookie growing pains. So even though they have upgraded the pass defense, they've upgraded the cornerback position, it's going to take a little time to show up because Justin Gilbert is new and he's green and he's learning the game. He only had 14 snaps in this past game. Yeah. Joe Hayden is having some early struggles. He gave up touchdown passes to Antonio Brown, Jimmy Graham, and in this past game, he gave up the big back-breaking play. They need him to be locked down in that situation. So some of the guys that are your top picks, your very highest picks, are not what we would say right now overachieving, and they need them to.
Tom, Joe Hayden, where's your level of concern?
It's just a little mystifying. Of course, if we go back to last season, at the end of last year, he had a couple games late in the year. People kind of tend to forget this because they were kind of out of the race by then. But I think of the game in Jacksonville where he gave up the touchdown late in the game. I don't want to say that it's a carryover, but he admitted it today. He's got to pick up his game. He is that, I believe, the highest paid player on the defensive thing, and not that that's the be all end all, but he wants to be considered in that class of the elite with Richard Sherman and Patrick Peterson. Well, he's not there right now.
Yeah.
He's going to have to elevate his play because so much of Mike Pettine's defenses is predicated on those press corners, and when they can't do that, then a lot of little things start to fall apart.
I think both of you have hit on it when it comes to Joe. At the first time that we saw him struggle, it was against Antonio Brown this year against the Steelers. And people were saying, well, that's a tough matchup. Antonio Brown's a really good wide receiver. Okay, so last week he struggles against Jimmy Graham because Jimmy Graham is an absolute monster. He's 6'7", and you've got Joe Hayden trying to cover him. It's not going to work out too well. Now it's Steve Smith Sr. We're getting into this point where we're trying to make excuses to figure out why he's playing so bad, but eventually he's just got to step up and he's got to make plays. In Seattle, they don't say, well, it was Larry Fitzgerald, so we'll give him a pass, or it was Anquan Bolden, we'll give him a pass. He's going out there, he's going against the best wide receiver on the other team, and Richard Sherman is shutting that guy down. Patrick Peterson usually doing the same thing for Arizona. Joe Hayden's not getting it done right now.
Well, the other thing is that I think they anticipated that Justin Gilbert would be a little farther ahead than he is right now. That would take a little tiny bit of the pressure off Joe if he had, more support going on like that around him. And then he's playing 99% man coverage in this defense. And so, of course, any little thing that doesn't go right, it's going to show up. I mean, you have to be on point all the time. The other thing is Joe Hayden is adjusting to the new rules for defensive backs, and you kind of have to feel your way. You might have to try to be a little bit more aggressive in the beginning and see what you can get away with now. And if they start calling it, then you can pull back a little bit, but you might need to put your hands on a little bit more and have a little bit more contact. I actually thought he had contact with Steve Smith in the end zone on that one, and I thought he got away with it there. So he might have to try to do that a little bit more, be a little bit more aggressive, and see if you can't get away with a few things, and then adjust your game after that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a little bit alarmed given the fact that he is a pro, an all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber guy, has this brand new contract. The struggles of Justin Gilbert, I think a lot of people expected those. Even the Browns said it when they drafted him. We drafted Justin Gilbert for what we think he can become, not necessarily what he is right now. When it comes to Joe, we're talking about a guy who was supposed to be one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL coming into this year, Tom. Pro Football Focus has him 93 out of 95.
Yeah, there's no excuses. I mean, he's had a poor start. They've gone against good quarterbacks, but there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the NFL. He just has to raise his level of play. I mean, it's part of the reason why they're in the position that they're in, and there's just no sugarcoating it. I think the coach the other day was on point with the comments he said, and Joe was today again. He understands he's got to be better.
I think the thing to remember too is, look, these are 3 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks that they've gone up against, and they have had no qualms about going after Joe Hayden in very key, important times of the game.
What does that say to you, Mary-Kay?
I think it's a concern, and I think any quarterback that you see going forward, they're all going to try it and see how it goes.
Now, when it comes to the defense, it was something that was supposed to be a strength coming into this year. It hasn't been. Everybody knows that. 31st, Mike Pettin is a defensive-minded coach. Is there a belief internally that not only this thing can get turned around, but it can get turned around quickly in time for the Tennessee Titans?
I think so. I think that they believe that, not to make excuses for them, but they've played 3 really good quarterbacks in a row, 3 pretty good offenses in a row. Now they have a stretch of games where, you could argue that they should be able to win 4 of the next 5 games. And whatever loss is in there. And maybe it's Pittsburgh, whatever. But they had better start winning games. And they'd better start playing better defense, because these aren't, other than Roethlisberger, these aren't real strong quarterbacks.
You're right.
Coming up against. So this is maybe where they can get their confidence going in the right direction for that, week. They could be sitting at 5-3, but again, they're going to have to pick up their game defensively.
Mary-Kay, the bye week is this week. It comes at a time where they're coming off a loss against the Baltimore-Ravens, but at a time where they're a little bit banged up, especially when it comes to Ben Tate and Jordan Cameron still nursing that shoulder injury. Did the bye week come at a good time for the Browns, or would you say a bad time, given the fact that they probably want to get back on the field and avenge this loss against the Ravens?
You know what? I think that it's a little early for a bye week. I think guys would appreciate a bye week about midway through the season when, you're just hitting that wall, the young guys. That's when the Gilberts and some of these young guys, the Crowells, the Terrence Wests, week 8, week 9, that's when their college seasons would be starting to wind down and they're starting to hit that rookie wall. So ideally, you want to have your bye week much later than this, but there really is nothing that you can do about it. And there is another way to look at it, and that's, again, when I talked to Jim Leonard, the safety, he said, you know what? It's probably a good time for us right now to stop and reset the defense. We have got to stop and figure out how to fix this right now before we get too deep into it and you just get into your game plan week by week and you don't have time to do it. Now they can go over every single play, and even in just watching this past game, I was noticing some things that actually, when I looked at Pro Football Focus, the rankings of Ataba Rubin and some of these guys, I looked at it and I thought, you know what, they don't seem super comfortable, some of these guys, yet in the new scheme. So now they have to go back and look at it and think, do they need to roll some different guys in at different positions? Do they need to try something different with the scheme? Do they need to change up the fronts a little bit more? This is a chance to do that.
Switching over to the offensive side of the ball, talk about a group that looks comfortable right now. Brian Hoyer's got that offense clicking. The running game was okay. It wasn't great this past week against Baltimore, but it was okay. 21 points against the Baltimore-Ravens, Tom. That's not easy to do, and this offense was supposed to be a big question.
Yeah, it's funny because what Mary-Kay was saying, I agree exactly with her, what the defense is saying. I bet you the offense would wish another game is right now. I mean, they're rolling. Brian Hoyer even said as much the other day. We kind of wishes that they had a game this week. And, I mean, who knew? I mean, go back to 1969, the last time the Browns started out, scoring more than 21 points a game for the first 3 weeks. That's amazing. And they really have. They've had everything kind of working. And against a Ravens team that had only given up 1 touchdown to play that well. And really, I mean, they really did not, they weren't able to close the game. But hey, the special teams really let them down there. I mean, Hoyer really had enough points to win that game. They should have had enough points to win that game or get them close enough to win the game. They just didn't, they fell short. But the receivers have been good. Hoyer's been strong. The running backs weren't quite as good this week, but that's a good defense, too. I mean, you're talking about a really strong defense. And I thought they were okay. And Ben Tate will probably be back by Tennessee game.
Talk about how good that defense is. When you're talking about trying to rush against the Baltimore Ravens, they haven't allowed an individual 100-yard rusher for 13 weeks. It was Eddie Lacy back in October of 2013. So, yeah, Terrence West struggled a little bit. Isaiah Crowell struggled a little bit. But those are things that you expect when you play against the Baltimore Ravens. And I look at the 21 points, and like you, Tom, and like you, Mary-Kay, I more point towards the defense, saying, hey, you let us down a little bit, and the special teams, because I thought Brian Hoyer and the offense probably did enough.
Well, they did. And you look at that fourth quarter, which, of course, anything that could go wrong in the fourth quarter did. I mean, when you just add it up and make a list, and I basically did write one story like that where I listed every single thing that happened. I mean, it was just, ridiculous, a comedy of errors. But Brian Hoyer did enough to win that game, I think, because when you look at the 70-yard pass to Taylor Gabriel, that could have been the game-winning play for them. And he wasn't able to make it. Now, we talked to the receivers coach today, and he said he lost that ball in the sun. Is what happened on that. He said he lost the ball in the sun, and it was remarkable that he was able to recover and catch it, and that he had the presence of mind, to get back up after he fell and to continue to run. And but Brian, did come through with that play that should have been, possibly the game winner. Now, of course, in the end, on those last couple of drives, nobody was able to pull it out. He went a little bit wide to Andrew Hawkins there. But I think, even like Mike Pettin said, the offense has overachieved, and the other two units have let it down a bit.
Chris Fedor, Mary-Kay-Cabot, Tom Reed, it's Browns Insider here on cleveland.com. I've been known as somebody who's been very difficult on quarterbacks. I've been very difficult at times on Brian Hoyer. I want to know if you guys think this is fair. If we're going to judge Brian Hoyer, usually by what he does late in games, we were able to ignore the Minnesota struggles in the third quarter because he pulled that game out last year and he had the game-winning drive. We ignored 9 of 21 start against New Orleans because he got hot and he had that game-winning drive backed up at his own 4-yard line. If we're going to focus a lot of attention on what he does late in games, is it fair to criticize the fact that the offense as a whole didn't do anything in the final 8 minutes of that game last week against Baltimore, and Brian Hoyer had one pass that he needed to complete? Andrew Hawkins was open. He won his matchup, and Brian didn't deliver.
Yeah, I mean, it's all what you do at the end of the game. I mean, so many of these, people always laugh about the NBA, well, I just watched the last 5 minutes. Well, the Browns are a classic example. They might as well be an NBA team because every game has come down the last couple drives. And yeah, I think it's fair, and I think he knows that he missed that pass. I thought the calls on the first couple downs were kind of curious because the Ravens were absolutely stacked, just waiting for a run, and it put him into a little bit of a tough situation. But yeah, you got to make those plays, and I think they had 1 first down in the fourth quarter.
In the same way that Joe Hayden needs to come up with that play against Steve Smith, Brian Hoyer has to make that pass, make that play on one of those last couple of drives to try to pull the game out, because that's what Joe Flacco did. He made that play to put them in field goal range and win the game.
And I think that's the real loss in that game was the ability. Good teams almost do those type of things on muscle memory. The Roethlisbergers, the Flaccos, the Tom Bradys. We saw it last year in New England when the Browns were up by 12 points. Those teams know they're going to win. Why? Because they've done it before. And if the Browns had won that game on Sunday, what confidence that would have given them. This is, they've been trying to close games since 1999.
Yeah.
But to have been able to do it on back-to-back weeks against quality opponents would have meant, I think, so much to them at going forward, knowing they can do it the next time.
And Tommy, you had that quote from Browns running back coach Wilbert Montgomery, who was with the Baltimore-Ravens before coming here to Cleveland, and he mentioned it. He said, when we were in Baltimore, we had the feeling internally that the Browns were going to do something to lose the game.
Yeah, and it's funny because he was asked about that today, and I was wondering if he was just going to say, well, that got a little overblown. No, he just stepped right with it. He goes, yeah, we basically, we were there and we couldn't execute. He says, I didn't execute, our coaches didn't execute, we didn't do enough. I mean, he knows, he's been a former player, he's played in the Super Bowl. He knows what it takes to win in this league, and it's something the Browns as a whole, and not just the offense, as a whole have to get over. Because we saw how many times last year they were in similar situations, and until they can start winning those games, it's like Pettin says, they got a term for almost winning, it's losing.
And well, the thing to also consider about this is, even though we have seen Brian Hoyer play very well and he has exceeded expectations, he has still now started only, 5-6 games in the NFL. Right. He has very little starting experience in the NFL. And when it comes down to crunch time, when you have 1 or 2 drives to win a football game, that's when usually your experience comes through. Yeah. And right now he doesn't have, not only does he not have it, but again, he's throwing to his little band of misfits, the Taylor Gabriels, the Andrew Hawkins, and some of those guys that haven't been there either. I mean, once again, Taylor Gabriel was a tryout player. And so these are big moments for some of these guys.
I got to tell you, Chris, I really think that and I know we're talking mostly about the failings of the offense and defense here. I think that game was lost in special teams.
Okay.
It's on Sunday. I just, you make one of those field goals.
Yeah.
If Travis Benjamin fields the punt, I mean, that play switched field position in the game, because if they're able to catch the ball at the 24-yard line, when they punt the ball, it's going to make that drive longer. And you also are probably a little more cautious, less cautious at the 24 coming out of your end than you are at the 7-yard line. I really think the special teams, I mean, we're right up there in culpability with the other two units.
Tom, I think you're right. And the interesting thing is, I think a lot of people see it. In the first 3 games, it has been shown that the Browns are going to play close games. They're going to be competitive games. Sometimes special teams can be the difference. And I think Baltimore-Ravens fans know all about Billy Cundiff and some of his struggles in game-winning situations or big-time situations. I'm not talking about the blocked field goal. He had nothing to do with that.
Right.
That was the protection scheme. I'm talking about the miss that he had. That is, for NFL standards, basically a chip shot. You chalk 3 points there, Mary-Kay, and Billy Cundiff didn't get it done. Any chance that the Browns consider a change at kicker?
You know what? I think right now they probably won't do that. In fact, long snapper, we asked Mike Pettin today, and he said he would be inclined to stick with him. Now, when you look at the 50-yarder, that was a low snap. I don't think they're really putting that so much on Billy Cundiff. Plus, the 50-yarders, he was 7 of 25 heading in from 50 plus. So they don't hope to put him in too many of those situations, but they do happen. And look what happens when you're on the lakefront in these, wait till the weather gets bad and you're trying to make some of these kicks. So, we'll see. These are all things. I think they'll bring guys in for tryouts, and they'll have a short list. But right now, I don't think any major changes are planned that way.
I mean, I just look at his history, and I saw a quote from somebody, I think it was NFL.com, saying if you're going to play close games and you're going to rely on Billy Cundiff, a guy who has shown to not be great in big spots throughout his career and not have the big leg, the big strong leg, accurate leg from that kind of distance, you might be in trouble.
There was such a furor last year when the previous administration went ahead and let Phil Dawson walk. And it became a non-story because Cundiff was never really put in that situation, with the exception of one kick in New England where he's trying like a 56-yarder. He actually almost made it.
Right.
But he really didn't have those kicks last year. All of a sudden, we've started the season where the special teams has become a huge storyline. And a little Travis Benjamin has, I believe, 3 returns for 2 yards. This is like a guy that they expected to be a really, a weapon for them. Give him some credit. He's coming off a knee injury. But I think what's amazing with him is he's been a factor offensively. He's had a couple of big catches, but on the special teams end, he has not been able to produce yet.
They might have to try someone else on the returns. And now,
do they have somebody else that they can try, Mary-Kay?
Well,
I was trying to rack my brain, think about who could go back there.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some guys, they've probably got some guys that can do it. Marlon Moore's there, and, there's some different guys that they can roll in there.
And then you wonder if you would try a guy like a Buster Screen or someone like that to do it. And I don't know. And of course, the person you talked to yesterday, Jim Leonard, is a guy that, if nothing else, he can catch the ball. He's sure-handed. And you do kind of wonder in that situation, they were trying to get a return there.
Yeah, they wanted the return.
They wanted the return, but in hindsight, maybe Leonard may have been the better play there, especially because Benjamin had muffed a punt earlier in the game.
You're right. It's Browns Insider here on cleveland.com. Browns at the bye week, they're 1-2, a loss against the Steelers, a win against New Orleans, then a loss against Baltimore. When they come off the bye, they're going to take on the Tennessee Titans. When they come off the bye, is Ben Tate going to be back, do you think, Mary-Kay? And if he does come back, is this his job again?
Well, I do think it will be his job again. I think that, I think they want to send the message that, we value our veterans and we're not going to let you necessarily lose a job because of injury. And Wilbert Montgomery was talking today about how Ben Tate is higher up that mountain than these two younger guys are. But we've all seen the explosiveness, that one-cut ability of Isaiah Crowell. It's exciting. I think he's actually probably surpassed Terrence West right now. But I don't know if Ben Tate will be exactly ready to go on October 5th, and he has the luxury of taking the time and healing up properly so that he can be around for the long stretch. They don't need to rush him in there. They've got two guys that can get the job done.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think he would like to come back, and I think signs are pointing that way. But as Mary Kay said, it's not as though the running game has been an issue with this group. That's down the line on their concerns. And I also agree with Mary Kay that Crowell is a guy to me that's really coming on. I'd like to see him get more carries than he's gotten so far. I thought he was pretty good the other day. I thought Terrence struggled a little bit. He had the penalty and he had the pitch that Benjamin had. That may have been Benjamin's best catch of the day. But yeah, I think the running game's okay. But the one thing about Ben Tate is I think he'll be able to catch the ball out of the backfield once he does get back. And Montgomery said they're ready to get him back. They're excited to get him back. So I do think when he does come back, he goes to the top of the depth chart.
You know what is one of the most incredible things about these first three games is no one is turning the ball over. That's amazing.
Only team in the league that does not have a turnover.
I mean, that is absolutely incredible to have two rookie running backs to play some of these really good defenses. I mean, Terrell Suggs, all he has to do is, look at a running back in Cleveland and he's, forcing a fumble. So to have these two young running backs to not fumble and to have Brian Hoyer with his 150-something streak without an interception, those are remarkable
Only
things.
team in the league without a turnover.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's absolutely amazing. It's one of their formulas, though. It's something that they talked about coming into the year. If we can rely on the defense, that hasn't worked so far in the first three, but if we can rely on the defense, the running game, and allow Brian to manage the game and not turn the ball over, they tried to use that formula coming into the season. That was their philosophy.
Yeah, and they've again, I think some of that's luck. I mean, you don't. We say this, and they'll probably have 5 turnovers in Tennessee.
Yeah.
But no, they've done a very nice job, and it's not like I'm trying to think of. I can't remember Brian. Has he really forced one where he got lucky?
A few. I think there were a few in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, some of it has been luck, and even he mentioned that some of it has been luck. I mean,
Ed Taylor dropped the one in the end zone, basically, in week 1 against the Steelers.
Yeah, so, you hope that, I'm sure they hope that they can continue this, but that's one of the good things going into the bye week is that they are all protecting the football.
One of the most talked about plays in the game against Baltimore didn't count. It was the Johnny Manziel play. When it happened, I loved it. I thought it was the most amazing play, but it was illegal, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you know what? It was an elaborate ruse. I mean, they really worked hard on this. We talked to Mike McDaniel today, the receiver coach that that was acting and looking so miffed. When Johnny came over the sidelines, he's like, "What the heck?" I mean, he really played it off. Kyle Shanahan, you can see him going, "Go, go, go." I mean, it's just the way that it all set up. You can tell that they really worked hard on this. The puzzling thing is, why were they working so hard all week on a play that was illegal? I think that's unfortunate. Either they were given wrong information about whether or not that play is illegal beforehand, before they started working on it, or they checked in with the officials. Now, Mike Pettin said he talked to the officials in a room before the game and was told the play is legal. So nobody seemed to know what was going on. John Harbaugh, after the game, said, "Oh no, if it wasn't for the shift, that would have been a legal play." He had no idea. The officials apparently had informed the Browns before the game that it would be legal, and they worked on something all week that they thought was going to be legal. Within seconds, Mike Pereira, the former VP of NFL officiating, now Fox analyst, within seconds he was like, illegal, that would have been illegal. And the back judge told Wilbur Montgomery that he would have thrown the flag anyways.
Yeah, that whole thing is a little bizarre. I don't know if Wilbur told us did say that the Browns were told, I don't know if it was Wilbur specifically, but the Browns were told after the fact that he would have thrown the flag. Now it doesn't.
What do you mean, would have?
Exactly. That's the part that doesn't quite add up, because if I'm the Ravens, I'm really upset now, because it should have been a 15-yard penalty. I don't quite understand that, but it just adds to the whole lure of the play.
Yeah, and when you look at what happened to the Ravens on the next drive, that was the drive where they lined up for the long field goal, the ridiculously long field goal, and then they got knocked back 5 yards by delay of game, and they ended up having to punt. So 10 yards
With that
would have
guy,
been a huge difference for
Justin
them.
Tucker.
It could have been the difference between winning and losing.
Really quick, want to talk about Johnny Manziel. Here's a guy, the Browns traded up for him. He was a first-round pick. He's a competitor. Brian's a competitor, too. What do you think is going through Johnny Manziel's head right now?
Well, it's funny. We've been talking the last couple of days with the guys, and I'm sure Johnny wants to get on the field and play as much as possible, but he seems to be becoming a pretty good teammate with Brian. I know you've written about that. I think your story's probably online already.
Well, not yet, but I have one specifically just about Johnny, and then the other one, it's coming after the show.
That's a tease.
But
Stay tuned.
had to rush down here. But here's what I think is very key about Johnny, and there is a method to their madness in this, in many ways. But one of the reasons why they're doing this is to keep Johnny interested.
Oh.
They have to keep his head in the game. They have to keep him excited throughout the week. They have to keep him from kind of falling back. They want to keep him on his toes, working hard, ready to go. So I think that's one of the reasons why they're doing it. I mean, now look, his 3 handoffs have netted, I believe, -1 yard, okay?
But they were so pretty, Mary-Kay.
Beautiful. And then, then he's got the 1 incomplete pass. So, and then he's, of course, got the illegal play. But did you see where they're going with this?
Yeah.
It's doing 3 things. It's keeping the defense honest, because Rob Ryan and the guys all have to spend all this time trying to figure out what Johnny's going to do. It's keeping Johnny's head in the game. You don't lose. He's a young guy. He's a young guy that is used to being the superstar. He's used to being in the spotlight. And if he was just languishing on the bench, you might lose him. And they need to keep him like really fired up. And then it's motivating Brian to say, get back on that bench, kid.
Yeah.
This is my team.
It's funny because we talked with Dal Loggins today, and he was saying one thing. There's no question that Brian is a competitor, and he's admitted that he doesn't like Johnny coming out there. But at the same time, he's also mature enough and selfless enough to handle it. That okay, he's going to come out here. It's not going to destroy my confidence. I can handle this. I'm okay with this. So I think they're making it work so far. I think they've made it work, and I do think that Manziel's excitement on the sidelines after the second win was genuine.
Oh, yes, definitely.
I think that so far, so good, especially in a role where he's clearly right now the number 2 quarterback, and unless there's an injury or unless Brian has a string of bad games, it's going to remain that way for a while.
And they do recognize that he is not really ready to get out there right now and run an NFL defense, especially when you're talking about trying to run a no-huddle offense, which they've done a lot, and Brian has what it takes to run that no-huddle. Johnny is nowhere near ready for that yet, but he's learning from watching, and he's also learning what it takes to be a pro.
Yeah, and Brian's teaching him that. And I think this, in the long term, who knows what's going to happen with Johnny Manziel. Maybe he makes it, maybe he doesn't. But I think that this was absolutely the right decision, the way they've gone. And the fact that Brian has been able to play as well as he has is buying Johnny more time to learn the game. He finally, he admitted a couple weeks he wasn't ready. I think it would have been a disaster had he started that game against Pittsburgh. He's learning it, and I think the other thing is it bought Mike Pettin time. Because if they would have gone out and laid an egg and ended up getting beat 45-10 in Pittsburgh, we all know the calls for Johnny Manziel would have started. And with the problems they already have on defense and special teams, this is not what a rookie head coach needs as a quarterback controversy. Brian's performance has really helped Mike Pettin, focus on some of the other problems and not have to worry about this quarterback situation and when is Johnny Manziel going to come in. Don't forget, Chris, a lot of people thought this was going to be the week where Johnny Manziel is going to come in, he's going to start in Tennessee. Brian has made that a non-factor right now.
Tom, Mary-Kay, 3 games done for the Browns, 13 more to go. Let's hand out some grades, okay? First 3 games, Brian Hoyer, give him a grade for what you've seen through the first 3.
You know what? I'm going to say B for Brian.
Okay. Is that because his name starts with
Brian? Exactly.
Okay.
B for Brian because although I think he has overachieved and he's done a great job, they are still 1 and 2. And there's still 2 games where he wasn't able to pull it out in the end.
Tom?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect grade. B, not just for Brian, but he's been good. And yeah, you're always judged by your record as a quarterback. Couldn't quite get it done the other day when all he needed was maybe 1 or 2 more first downs to kind of run out the clock at the end of the game. But so far, so good.
Mary Kay, Tom, Mike Pettin. You can't pick an M for Mike here this week.
You know what? I think I'm going to say C right now. I'm going to say C for the coaching staff because I do think that there are some issues with 12 men on the field. There's procedural issues. They ran an illegal play.
Right.
So I do think that a 1-2 record, that's below average. So an average grade I think is fair.
Yeah, B minus C. I'm in the same class. I think they've done it very good. They've been very competitive in these games. But again, we go back to they've been competitive, the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And they're still losing games. So I think he's got to find a way to turn this around. The
group of wide receivers as a whole, the group of misfits, Mary Kay.
You know what? Let's say I'm going to say B plus on the wide receivers. B plus. I do think that they have overachieved. They obviously haven't been perfect, but without Josh Gordon in there, we looked at these guys and thought, there's just no way they're going to get the job done. But look at Andrew Hawkins. Look at how well he's played. Miles Austin has come through with some big plays. Taylor Gabriel, at least he caught the 70-yarder. So I would say that again they've overachieved. B plus.
I'll give them a B, and I think they've been very solid. I mean, it's amazing to think of this was the same group that was dropping passes with regularity in the preseason. And I'll pick up on a point that Mary Kay. I think Andrew Hawkins has been excellent. I mean, this was a guy I was wondering in the preseason, where is this guy? Right. And he was nowhere to be found. And not only is he a good receiver, Chris, he's a tough kid. He blocks. He's given him all he can. And I've been very impressed with the group as a whole so far. And even throw the tight ends in Gary Barnidge, who made the 2 huge plays against New Orleans. That group has definitely overachieved.
Tom, you mentioned it. Nobody can cover this kid. Nobody can cover him. Every time I look at Andrew Hawkins, he's open by 2, maybe 3 yards. In a way, he's the anti-Joe Hayden. For Joe Hayden, it's starting to matter who he goes up against. For Andrew Hawkins, it doesn't matter what cornerback you put on this kid, he's getting open.
Well, one of the things when I went to Washington and talked to the Redskins about Kyle Shanahan, they said this guy the scheme that he runs, the receivers get open. They run a lot of misdirection, and just receivers find ways to get open in this offense. I know Santana Moss went on and on about the scheme for wide receivers because it does get you open, and we've seen it time and time again. We were talking to a couple of the Ravens writers after the game, and they've never seen the Ravens cover so poorly. Matt Elam, a couple times was just completely lost on receivers. So I don't know exactly what. I think it's a combination of the receivers and the scheme, but they're doing a nice job.
Fill in the blank. We've got 2 fill in the blanks before we get out of here. Mary Kay, fill in the blank. Blank is what the Browns' record would be with Josh Gordon.
Let me say 2-1 right now.
Okay.
I think that would have been worth at least 1 more victory.
She took my answer. Yeah,
That's okay.
2-1. I definitely
same thing. All right. Blank has been the Browns' best player in the first 3 games. Mary Kay.
Let me say Brian Hoyer.
You're going to say that too?
Let me come up with somebody different. Yeah, I would have.
You're going to go with Hawk?
It's Brian Hoyer.
Look at that. You agree. The last 2, you agree.
We have to start disagreeing more.
Yeah,
this is too nice.
I would have said Carlos Dansby, but he wasn't quite as good against the Ravens as he was.
Tayshaun
Gibson's been, obviously a couple picks. Sure. But Hoyer's just been, again, it's just I don't want to say surprising, but it is in some ways that he's played this well so far.
All right, that's it for Browns Insider tonight here on cleveland.com. Browns at the bye week. They're 1-2, 1 win against the New Orleans Saints when they come back from the bye. They'll be taking on the Tennessee Titans. We'll be back with you next week to talk all about that game, get you ready for that matchup to see if the Browns can make it 2-2 on the season through 4 games. For Mary-Kay-Cabot, Tom Reed, I'm Chris Fedor. Thanks for joining us tonight.